JJ's Mailbag is back. Pretty simple and straightforward and to the point. I make posts on YouTube, on IG, sometimes on Twitter, asking for questions, predictions, hot takes, everything in between. I pick the best ones and I turn it into a video. What's up, everybody? It's JJ Buckets, and that's what we're doing today. If you want to be featured in these in the future, just make sure you're keeping a lookout on socials. I make a community post on YouTube. I usually make a story on IG. Sometimes I'll throw a tweet out there as well on Twitter. So if you want to be featured on these, that's how for next time. Until then, we're going to get this one going. But before we do, just as usual, make sure you're leaving a like on the video if you enjoy what you're watching. And if you're new here and you haven't already subscribed, smash that button. I'm not even going to talk about 1K. It's something that I want. So come on, help a guy out. Yeah, other than that, let's hop into the first one we got here. The first one here is a prediction, and it's Precious MIP year. Interesting. So I am in the camp that I want to see Precious Achiuwa start this season. KD talk aside, and believe me, there's a bunch of those. We'll get to them in this installment. KD talk aside, if the team is more or less what it is now heading into next season, I would personally like to see Precious Achiuwa start at the 5, Pascal go back to the 4, Scotty play the 3, OG play the 2, Fred play the 1, and then Gary Trent Jr. plays a 6-man spark plug off the bench. I think that, in my opinion, and at least in my heart, that is what I want to see next season, because it potentially helps solve a couple of issues for your team, and I think you take that. Particularly, obviously, the bench scoring with Gary Trent Jr., but we're not talking about Gary Trent Jr. here. We are talking about Precious Achiuwa, and why I bring this up is because I do think if Precious Achiuwa gets a chance to start, and he's getting those big minutes with the starting lineup, and, gets more easy looks because guys like Pascal, Scotty, etc. are regularly taking, attention away from him. I think he has a chance to have a really productive year, and a good chance to have a year so productive that he may be in consideration for MIP. Now, Precious last year had such an incredible story of player development from where he was in the beginning of the season to where he was at the end. There were points in last season where I'd say probably about midway through the year where, thinking about playoff minutes, playoff rotations, I honestly didn't even know how big of a role Precious would have. But then he got so much better in the second half of the season that Precious Achiuwa really came on, and then he became your 6-man. He became this point of consistency coming off the bench, and he's obviously so good at so many things already, and he's improving so quickly at the ones that he's not. Like with Precious, obviously the defense is there. The defense is there. He's got a decent scoring touch around the basket, and obviously his shot is greatly improving as well. He's tried to experiment with his handle to mixed results, I would say, but it's signs of growth. It's signs of steady improvement. And if you are seeing this kind of improvement from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, I'm very curious to see with a full off season right now what he comes back as starting next year. And again, I would really like to see Precious run with the starters because it solves a couple of issues in the same light, and again, because frankly I think it'll put him in the best position to succeed. So as far as predicting Precious for most improved player next year, I really don't think it's a stretch. I think this guy's got a good chance. Will he beat out some other possible contenders? We'll see when the time comes, but nonetheless, I think you can expect a healthy jump from Precious Achiuwa this upcoming season. Devin Booker has no dog in him. Talking intangibles is always a little tough, realistically speaking. It's not easy to look at a person and know what's going on in their minds unless you're Professor X from the X-Men or something like that. That being said, I'm kind of inclined to agree on this one, just because, you watched the guy fold in that series against the Mavericks, a series where they were heavy favorites, I would say, heading into it, and then obviously Luka Magic changed all of that. And I just don't know if Devin Booker is the guy on, your championship team. I know it's weird to say considering they were just in the finals a couple of years ago, but and don't get it twisted, I like Booker. I really do. I think he's a good player. I just don't know how much I trust him, being the guy, just straight up being the guy, going head to head with some of the other game's greats. I think Devin Booker's a really good player, but I think he's probably a 2 or a 1B to somebody else's 1A that has that dog in him. The 2019 Raptors would have been a fully healthy Warriors squad that year. Due to the slow ISO style, the Warriors were forced to play with KD. Interesting take. Always loved revisiting the championship. First things first, that team is so underrated by the general NBA audience, in my opinion. I know that's very easy to say as a Raptors fan, but you look at the amount of just quality pieces on that team. That was one of the best constructed teams of the decade. Easy, bar none. But they were going up, in theory, if we're talking here fully healthy, the Warriors juggernaut that had Steph, KD, Clay, Draymond. Thing is though, past that Warriors team really did have to sacrifice a lot of depth, which is quite frankly what has made them special at a lot of points during their dynasty years, to obviously get Kevin Durant, and at that time obviously DeMarcus Cousins was also there. Obviously the shell of DeMarcus Cousins was nowhere near, prime Boogie or anything like that. Do I still think the Raptors win that series? And in particular, like the stylistic offensive approach that didn't necessarily work for the Warriors with KD's ISO game. I get that point, and actually I feel like it's a pretty valid one to an extent. Do I still think the Raptors win that series? I'm gonna take the most politically gray, I think, opinion on this that I possibly can. And people are gonna hate me for it, but I think that series goes to 7, realistically. I think the Raptors had the perfect toolbox to challenge that team no matter what, quite frankly. But having that Kevin Durant element in there, it's tough because, you're talking about one of the greatest scorers of all time, and you're talking about one of the greatest scorers of all time not even getting that kind of attention defensively because all the attention is going to Steph Curry. Quite frankly, that was part of why, respectfully, Kevin Durant was so good in Golden State, was people were more scared of Curry and were more focused on the gravity that Steph Curry had than Kevin Durant. So it's a tough question. I'm going to say the series goes to 7, and I'm not going to give you a definitive winner because, quite frankly, this is all hypothetical anyways. For my Raptors fans, yeah, they absolutely still win the series. For my non-Raptors fans, I don't know. I frankly don't know. I'm going to put these last two together because we're essentially talking the same topic here. We're talking Kevin Durant. So they just kind of go hand in hand. And for the life of me, I cannot, go through this entire comment because it was a big one and it was a very clearly thought out one. So shout outs to you, Dean, for that one. Obviously, it's going to be on the screen and you can look at it whenever you need to. Do I think this package goes through as a trade? I'd honestly probably say no, just because I don't think Brooklyn is getting back enough. Gary Trent Jr. being the only big selling piece for them as a young prospect, considering what they've been asking for, I don't think that gets it done. And don't get me wrong, Brooklyn's been asking for a metric haul for Kevin Durant, and quite frankly, I don't think they're gonna get it. I think the price, or I guess the asking price, will eventually come down for Kevin Durant. That being said, even when it does come down, quite frankly, I think the Raptors are better off packaging both OG and Gary Trent Jr. to the Nets. I think that's a more enticing deal than, involving Indiana in this case. And quite frankly, if you need to give, you're going to need more picks in this trade too. Again, we're talking about an old version of Kevin Durant, don't get me wrong. We're talking about a version of him that's 33 and, you know, with some injury history very recently, but even still, like, considering some of the hauls, in particular the Gobert haul earlier this offseason and even just in the past that we've seen 4-star players, I don't think this is enough. So the segue from there to the next question is, what would my package be? Now, I don't like doing trade packages anymore, quite frankly. It's something that I did when I was kind of, you know, I don't want to say starting out, but I'd say earlier in my creator days, I used to do trade packages and stuff like that fairly often. I have seen the futility to an extent in doing those. Like, there was one time where I absolutely nailed like a Chris Paul trade package where it was almost exactly what it ended up being, minus the draft pick compensation. But outside of that, like, doing trade packages is just a lot of exhausting work for very little to no reward in terms of the actual product, in terms of what you see. But like, rough idea of what I would say the package should be to Brooklyn. Like, at most, OG, Trent, probably Malachi to make the money work, and then whatever level of picks you think that deserves. So that does it for this installment of the Mailbag. Obviously, anytime I do one of these, there are a lot of opinions and takes of my own shared. So if you want to criticize me for it, do it in the comment section. Other than that, to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the video, like it. If you're still watching, you very clearly did, to at least some extent. So hit that like button, it takes like a second, makes a huge difference for me. And if you're new here, and again, you're still watching, then definitely hit that subscribe button. I drop content fairly regularly, at least once a week. And so make sure you're around for that by staying subscribed. I don't know. That's gonna do it for me today. It's been JJ Buckets. It's been a real one, and I will see everybody next time.